All right, Ashley, thank you so much for being here on the All Bets Are Off podcast. I am really looking forward to this.
Thanks for having me.
I got to tell you, I received your book as a Christmas gift and I read it in 2 days because I could not put it down.
Oh, that makes me so happy.
I'm telling you, I think I read a review on it that said it was like a love letter to Scream fans, and I could not agree more because I needed this book more than I knew.
What makes you say that?
Oh my God, I've been obsessed with Scream since it came out, and as I sit here in my stab shirt, um, and there's always something about it that drew me in. That you almost can't put your finger on it first, and then as the franchise continues, and you fall more and more in love with the movies and the characters and the lore that goes on behind it, you almost can't get enough of the backstage view of what's going on, what went into these movies, and what makes them so special. And you summed everything up so perfectly and put a little bow on top and just gave it to all of us, and it was fantastic.
Oh, I love to hear that.
I'm telling you, and I'm not even just blowing smoke here. So I need to let's jump into the book, which is your favorite scary movie. And was this the first book that you wrote?
It was, yeah.
Wow. So how did that start? Like, where in your mind were you like, you know what? I love this movie or this franchise so much. I need to write about it.
I had always wanted to write a book. What book that was, what kind of book, I hadn't really ever put too much thought into it because I just got busy with, like my day job and life. And I just knew it was something I wanted to do at some point. And so I was working at the Hollywood Reporter covering business and legal primarily.
Mhm.
And the 25th anniversary of the first movie was coming up. And so I pitched an oral history because it was my first favorite movie. I wanted to do something fun. I tended to stay in my lane, but you know, worked up the courage to pitch it and they said yes. And so I wrote an oral history of the first movie and I loved it. It was such a great experience. And I was really happy. And the funny thing is, I remember saying to my husband at the time that I had enough for a book, that I had so much left over from the oral history that I could write a book. But that was it. And then a couple of months later, my now agent, John, cold emailed me when I was like extremely pregnant with my youngest son and said that he had seen my oral history and he thinks there needs to be a book on Scream. And here's why I'm the person he thinks should do it. And we ended up having a Zoom and he convinced me to give it a shot.
Wow, that's incredible. So if you already had like all of this information, I can only imagine like how long did it take you to really compile it and organize it and put it into a book format?
So the oral history, I thought I would end up using more of my leftovers. I
Mhm.
think I ended up using like two quotes, and
Wow.
everything else was original from the interviews I did specifically for the book. So the
Mm.
oral history, I think I worked on for about 3 or 4 months. The book was 2 years almost exactly. I did my first interviews in February 2023. And then I did a couple of like one last catch up call
Mm.
type interviews in March of this past year. And so it was 2 full years of interviews and writing, and the bulk of the book was written by that point, but I was
Mm.
still adding and changing, and I think I rewrote the opening like 4 times before I finally landed on the one that I stuck with. The first line is always the hardest.
Wow, that's awesome. I mean, 2 years is it's a long time to compile information. So I guess my next question would be, what made Scream your favorite scary movie for a time period there?
It surprised me.
Mm.
I grew up watching procedurals with my parents, and I'm very good at figuring out the mystery. And so usually when I watch any kind of who done it, I'm at least a couple of steps ahead.
Mhm.
And Scream, I had no idea. And so the fact that the mystery really kept me on the edge of my seat, and it was so scary, but it wasn't like punishing.
Mm.
It wasn't only scary. It was also funny, and you felt like you knew these kids. And the age I was a preteen, so like high schoolers were the coolest people on the planet when you're that age, and so like I wanted to be friends with all of these people. And it was Kevin Williamson just did such a good job of creating characters that felt real,
Mhm.
and you actually cared what happened to them. And it was also rewatchable because there are so many little like hints along the ways and glances and lines. And so every time, I watch it, I still notice new things.
And you did a great job, 'cause since you brought up Kevin, I kind of want to talk about him for a second. Um, Bringing him to light in a way that I think Scream fans know that he was important to Scream, but I think after your book, it becomes clear that he was like the heartbeat behind making sure that this happened and that it continued. And I found it amazing to read about him and read quotes from him. And were you surprised at the amount of people who have worked on the Scream franchise that were willing to do the interviews with you when you were doing this book?
Yes and no.
Mhm.
I know from having covered the entertainment industry that, wrangling talent is hard because they're busy people. They're constantly getting bombarded with asks. So anytime you're having to reach out to publicists and convince them to, put something in front of one of their clients, like I knew some of it was going to be an uphill battle, but the thing that I also knew is that people really enjoy the experience of working on these movies.
Mm.
So it's something that they're happy to relive. It's something that they're happy to talk about, which helps.
Well, it was definitely cool to see so much from Kevin in your book and to hear from him because I don't feel like I ever really have seen anything so in depth with him specifically. I also think that it's great the way that you painted the picture of Wes Craven because what an amazing individual and genius, and you really made sure that people knew that, and I thought that was a nice touch also.
Yeah, he was so important to this franchise, and he was just so brilliant and so beloved that like there was always a Wes chapter from the very first draft of my proposal. I never considered not doing that.
Mhm.
Um, and it was a big part of the reason why I decided to do a narrative format instead of an oral history, because, obviously he is no longer with us. And I could have used quotes from him, which there are a couple in there, but it would have just felt weird. I think I would have felt obligated to use more from him. And the stuff that I got talking to the people who worked with him to let them tell those stories was just so great. Like I, you know, it's pretty unique the way that people talk about him.
Mhm. Well, it's very obvious that he was loved by everybody that worked on these films. And I need to ask this as well because again, the book covers the entire franchise. Was that always the goal, or did it start to just cover the original Scream?
Originally, I was just going to do the first 4 movies, the Wes Craven
Okay.
movies, because the franchise is ongoing. And at the time when my agent and I were talking through it, it was a bit like, okay, well, if we just do the Wes Craven movies, then it's a complete story. And it
Mhm.
doesn't matter how many more they make.
Mhm.
But the thing that I learned, which is wild to me, but also kind of freeing, is I was very afraid after I sold the book that I was going to have to like rigidly stick to my proposal. But apparently that's not the case at all. As long as you're not like delivering a totally different book, the proposal is like essentially no longer existent once you get to that point. And so I, talked to my editor about the new movies, and my original plan had been to talk to the team that's making the new movies about the original movies. So still
Oh.
talk to all of these people about the franchise and why they love it, because so many of them are huge fans, but do it through the lens of let's talk about the first four and why you wanted to be part of this, etc. But I think my very first conversations with some of these people, like 3 minutes in, I was like, that's not going to cut it. Like, if these are really smart people and they have a lot of really interesting things to say, and the movies that they made are more important than, my fear of not knowing how to end this if I do all of the, you know what I mean? Because that was part of the problem is, okay, well, it's an ongoing franchise. If I include the new movies, how do I end it?
Yeah.
And, Kevin Williamson coming back to direct Scream 7, the universe did me a solid.
Yeah. Yeah, that's huge. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because that was what I wanted to segue into was, I mean, he comes back to direct Scream 7, and then you actually get to include, you know, essentially like teasers about what's coming up with the new film, which is coming out in a couple weeks, by the way. So, I mean, when you got that news, how excited were you that you could add that to your book?
I was just excited it was happening because, and I put this in the book, like 2 weeks before they asked him to direct it, I asked him if he would ever direct Scream.
Yeah.
And he said no. And so when I saw the news, I was like, Kevin, what? And I was just like dying to know like what happened and talk to him about like how everything played out and like what it was like when he got the call and what went through his head and like, what changed. And I think he just thought it was never going to happen. So like, why want something that's never going to happen kind of a situation, because it was the obvious answer, like so obvious that just me also came up with it. And so I was really happy for Kevin and for the franchise. And the fact that it gave me a good ending to the book was just a bonus.
Oh, that's so great. Since the book came out, do you have a lot of Scream fans hitting you up and asking you like to rank your favorite, Scream movies in order and all that stuff? Are you getting like a lot of really in-depth, loyal fan base questions?
Most of the messages I get are people just reaching out to thank me for writing the book. They say things like, I feel like this was written for me, and I didn't, like you said, I didn't know how much I wanted this book. And that's the best. It's been mostly interviews where people have been like, hey, rank the movies.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how many times are you going to make me say Scream 3 is my least favorite? When I don't dislike Scream 3, it's so fun. It's just, if I'm ranking them as Scream movies, it feels the least screamy to me.
And it's funny, and I'm not going to ask you to do that, by the way. I was just curious how many people do ask you to do that. But it's funny because a lot of people with my podcast, because we talk about horror so much, will ask me to rank, certain franchises, and Scream comes up quite a bit. And my ranking changes because it depends on how I'm feeling that day, because I do enjoy every movie in the franchise. So I was more so curious if it was the same way for you.
Yes and no. I have like tiers that don't change, right? Like Scream, the original to me is like untouchable because it changed everything.
Yes.
Scream 2 is very, very, very close for me.
I agree.
I don't like question anybody who says Scream 2 is their favorite. I get it. And then there's sort of like the next tier, which is, all of the other movies, because there's not as big of a gap, between those sets. But, I really liked Scream 6 because of the ways that it made places that you're supposed to go to for safety in these situations just wildly unsafe.
Yes.
Like in your own apartment, surrounded by how many people? And like, you don't win? Like what? And the bodega, I still love it. It reminds me of Jurassic Park and the subway scene. Oh my God. I went to New York for the first time since having seen Scream 6 a couple of months ago. And I thought about it more than I would care to admit. And so, I do really like that, but it's also the most recent one. So there's, some degree of like recency bias as well. And, there are a lot of things that I do really like about Scream 3 and Scream 4, which end up generally being toward the bottom for me, that I'm like, every time I talk about them, I feel the need to defend them because it's like, I'm not saying I don't like these movies. I'm not saying they're not good. I'm just saying if you're making me rank them, something's got to be at the bottom. And, you know, I think Scream 3 is just, the stakes aren't quite as high because it's mostly, it's not happening to Sydney. It's happening around Sydney to the
Mhm,
people who are making this movie.
mhm.
And, but at the same time, the acting and the casting in that movie is so brilliant. And then like Scream 4 was really ahead of its time in terms of its commentary on social media and then,
Mhm.
this like influencer culture that came after it, which was like so smart.
Yeah.
And also the fact that the practical effects, like the what they did to that bedroom is just like they did that to a house in Michigan. Like
Yeah.
I that endlessly amuses me. So there's something to like about every single one of these movies. So I'm not surprised that your ranking changes because they're also different.
And I gotta agree with you on the very first thing you said, though, is that Scream 1 is always gonna be the one. But yes, I agree with everything that you just said, and I wanna know too, because I mean, it's super clear that you love these movies just hearing you talk about them, which is amazing. But were you a horror movie fan before you saw Scream, or did Scream open that door?
You're not the first person to ask me this question, but I recently watched the Indiana Jones movies with my kids. And growing up, I really, really, really loved Temple of Doom, which as an adult is a horror movie. Like I didn't realize that
Yeah.
as a kid, and I definitely saw that before Scream, and that's my favorite Indiana Jones. I love Kate Capshaw in that movie. She's like the only reasonable character in that movie. Um, so I guess yes, but I didn't know it. It wasn't like a
Mm.
conscious thing because my parents didn't really watch horror. So I saw Scream, when it was out on VHS, and then I started watching stuff with my friends as like a preteen and teenager. And then when I got old enough, I would go see things, at the movie theater. I think I saw the first Grudge in theaters twice, which is
Oh,
like
wow.
so random. Um, but I think the first horror movie I probably saw and really liked was Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, but I didn't realize it was horror. And then I obviously like I read a bunch of Goosebumps. I had all of the Goosebumps books as a
Oh,
kid, but I
yeah.
also wasn't thinking about the fact that like that's horror. Edgar Allan Poe, which I loved as a kid, horror. Like so, yes is the answer, but I was not aware of it.
I love that. You were a closet horror fan without knowing it. I love that. The Goosebump books were amazing too, by the way, so that was cool that you just brought that up. But, I wanna say too is the fan base for Scream is I said this earlier, but so rabid, so loyal, and do you find now with this book being out that they have the same reasons for loving this film as you? Or are you seeing, like, more of a wide range of, "Well, this did this for me, and this brought this out of me," and you know what I mean?
On a surface level, I think people have all kinds of different reasons
Mhm.
for loving these movies in this franchise. But I think that deep down, it goes to what Patrick Lussier and I talked about when he was talking about conversations he used to have with Wes Craven. He edited the first three movies
Mhm.
about what experiencing fear in a movie does for you as a person
Yeah.
in terms of helping you safely confront scary things and
Yeah.
survive them and the sort of resiliency that builds. And the same reason why it's fun to be scared is the same reason why it's like cathartic to be scared. You not everybody makes it out at the end, but you do. And so I think that, that is sort of the broadest appeal for horror that I would say is probably pretty universal.
What would you say that your personal biggest hope was when this book was about to come out? Like, what in your mind was like, I really hope that people, whatever.
I mean, obviously, I wanted to do a good job. I wanted the fans to feel like the call was coming from inside the house, right? Like, I didn't, because I wasn't like some kind of famous author doing
Mhm.
this. I was like very afraid of people being like, well, who is she to talk about my favorite thing? You know what I mean?
Mm,
And I haven't felt that at all. Like, they, regardless of how much they liked or didn't like the movie, the fact that like I am a member of the fan base uh, seems to have been well received.
mm.
I really wanted the people I spoke with for the book to like it. I didn't want anybody to read it and be like, I spent this many hours with you on Zoom for this, and so
Yeah.
the people who have told me that they read it like have all really liked it. So that's been great. And I just, that's what I wanted, is it to be clear that, this was important to me. I took it seriously. I worked very hard, but I also made it with a lot of love.
I want to allude to the fact that you were worried about how people would receive it because, like, who is she? But your background was in entertainment journalist, right? And broadcast news. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's like, of course you should write a book. you know?
Imposter syndrome, man.
Yeah.
Like, it's killer.
you know that I understand 1000%. Do you see yourself doing, like, comic cons and stuff like that? Signing the book and things like that in the future?
I would love to. The book came out in August, so we missed, a lot of the cons. I think New York might have been right after it,
Mhm.
but it was still sort of like in the initial kickoff phase. But yeah, I would absolutely love to do that and, get to talk to people.
So many of the Scream cast from every single movie do these cons, and I just like, as soon as I put the book down, when I finished that last page, I was like, God, how many people would love to get this signed by you while they're meeting like Matthew Lillard or anybody, and I just think that would be such a cool thing to have this book signed by the cast of Scream at these comic cons. So it automatically rushed through my mind.
Hey, hopefully they agree and they start bringing your book with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I this is a really cool thing that I just found out that I didn't know, but you actually had Ghostface. Ghostface is doing the audiobook. He's if you listen to the book, Ghostface is reading it to
Yeah, it's Roger L. Jackson, which was like my idea. I don't remember. I was talking to my agent and my editor, and um like he was the only idea. Like, I didn't have a backup, and I was like, can I ask him? And I had to wait till it got to a certain point in the process to like get the approvals from the publisher side, but they were thrilled when they heard the idea. And he was one of the people that I talked to, closer to the end of the reporting, just to do a quick last catch up call. And when I was done asking him all of my questions, I was like, okay, hold on a second. There's one other thing. I was so nervous. Like, is there any universe in which you would narrate the audiobook? He's like, this audiobook? Yeah. Like, it was so excited, said yes immediately. And he did such an amazing job. It was so like, it's perfect.
That's great. I'm not gonna lie, I did already read the book, but when I found that out, I was like, well, now I need to listen to it. So I think I have to do that now. I'm such a fan of the book, and now I want to hear it, narrated by him. And let's tell our
Sorry.
listeners. That's okay. Let's tell our listeners too that your dog is a part of this interview. So
Yes, my dog James Bond was on my lap. He just jumped off to go bark it. I have no idea what.
now, before I end this interview with a final question on the book, we do this thing here when somebody comes on for the first time called the lightning round, and I ask you a bunch of random questions that have nothing to do with what I'm asking you about. It's just for our listeners to get to know you on a different level. So, the first question is pretty, I think, easy. Uh, Favorite style of pizza, New York or Chicago?
I'm going to get myself in trouble because I
Mhm.
am from the Midwest and live in the Chicago suburbs, but New York style. I don't think Chicago style pizza is pizza any more than a calzone is pizza. It's the same ingredients, but it's a different entity.
That's a smart answer. Are you a dinner or dessert person?
Dinner.
Do you listen to rock and roll?
Yes.
So would you take Poison or Motley Crue?
Poison.
All right. If you're stranded on a desert island, what 5 albums are you taking with you?
Oh gosh. Okay. We need to have different purposes
All right.
for the albums, right? Um Having recently moved back to the Chicago area, I've been listening to a lot of Lupe Fiasco
Mm.
lately. So I'm going to go with Food and Liquor. I This is so embarrassing.
The look on your face is making me nervous.
When I need to concentrate, I listen to aggressive like dubstep
Okay.
and so like Yellow Claw, Amsterdam's work music. um I feel like I also need something mellow in there. And I don't want to put myself in the position of having to pick an album. So I'm gonna cheat and say like a best of Tom Petty
Oh,
situation.
that's a good one.
And then Max Richter Sleep
You
for
know what?
instrumental.
You picked. You totally threw me off. I had no idea where you were going with any of it, and I love that.
It's eclectic.
I love that.
Oh wait, that was that 4 or 5? I don't know.
That was 4.
I give up. Do I have to pick one more? What's something else?
You don't have to, but
I'm gonna go with Nas Illmatic.
wow, yeah, you definitely threw me off with. They're all different. I love it.
Yeah. All right. I'm feeling pretty good about that combination.
All right. Well, the next question might be what ends you up on the desert island. I don't know. But if you're going through the Bermuda Triangle, are you taking a plane or are you taking a boat, and why? You have to assume that you're superstitious here.
Fuck. Boat.
And reason?
Because I feel like you stand a better chance of being able to avoid it if you can see it clearly.
All right. Good
And I
answer.
don't think you would have that point of view from the airplane. That's an interesting question.
I try for that. But this next one isn't as much interesting as it is fun for me. Would you take the original Halloween or the original Friday the 13th?
Halloween.
All right. And would you take Chucky or the Leprechaun?
Chucky.
All right. So that's it for the lightning round. You made it through, you survived, and you gave some great answers. But now, my final question about the book is, did it ever cross your mind, while either writing it or now, to turn this into like a 3 or 4 part documentary, like an actual video that could be streamed on Netflix or anything like that? Because this book is that good and that in depth that I feel like it could easily translate into a documentary.
That's a great question. Yeah, it could. It definitely could. I would watch it.
I hope so. I think that would be really cool for Scream fans. And before I get you out of here officially, I would like you to plug anything you have coming up next that you can talk about, and I would also like you to plug your social media so that people could follow you and support you.
Yeah. I'm in the process of figuring out what the next book is going to be. So I don't know yet. Stay tuned on that. I still write about the entertainment industry for The Ankler. I write a twice monthly newsletter called Deal Makers, so you can
Hmm.
find me there. And for socials, I am everywhere, but I'm the least bad at Instagram.
All right. Sounds good.
And it's
Well,
just, yeah, Ashley_Collins.
well, thank you so much for doing this. This was a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoyed yourself. And I need to now listen to your book.
Thank you. Have fun. Enjoy Roger.